Welcome to the world of M.W. Lewis. This is M.W. here. Happy New Year. It is 2026, and on the show this year, we're going to try something new. I'm going to try video a little video podcast. I've been building out the little office room I work in, and mostly for D&D. I have a separate room that I do my professional work in because, like many professionals these days, I work from home. But sometimes I actually work right here in my D&D room. I got a nice desk, I guess in the spring of last year. It's a riser desk. I'll show you. I can push a button here, and up goes my computer. I'm going to stop that right now. Uh, and I've been decorating, building out the room, and I often find there are times during my day working from home. Cheers, everyone. Cheers. Happy New Year again. I'm going to have a little sip here of my coffee. When I can actually have both my computers on and do both. I can work a little bit on my D&D and or other projects, and I can get my work done. So I built out the set behind me. I got this really great bookshelf last year from IKEA, and I have a big bookshelf in this other room that I have in my house. I called it my office. This room actually used to be where my son did his homework. It was his office. So, excuse me, neck's a little sore. Got to crack it. So I got this bookshelf from IKEA last year, and I moved a lot of books in here. A lot of my fantasy books, my Dungeons and Dragons books. Put some stuff up in here. I have actually a timer from a guy I play with at our Uncon in last July, and in cleaning up the place, I found it and I took it home with me, and I am going to reunite it with him when we play the Uncon in May, unless he doesn't want it. He said he might just get a new one. He said don't bother shipping it. So trust me, he and I have talked about it. I got books. My great literature down here. Some of the great literature I've been reading, and down at the bottom there are some Star Wars comics and stuff I found. My Star Wars albums. These are original mine from way back. And of course, the posters behind me. I've had the Star Wars poster for years and just kept it, stored. But I bought these two on Amazon just recently, and they're just reproductions, prints. They're not really scaled like the movie poster would have been. Yeah, the white border around them shows that they not were not bled printed like the Star Wars poster. But that's okay. I like them a lot. It's Dragon Slayer and Excalibur, two of my favorite movies. My sons are kind of, they understand I do this a lot now, and my younger one got me this really great poster at a Christmas mart he was at, and it's a Japanese a reproduction in commemoration of the release of the Japanese dub version, uh, which starts May 15th, 1982. So it's a reproduction of the U.S. Star Wars posters. It's sort of an amalgamation of them. This is great. This will find a place here in the set. Maybe here. I don't know. I'll put it up somewhere. So my goal will be to, when I do things like ruminations or rules discussion muddles, my introductions, to do a little video, and then I have the music and stuff for my readings from AD&D, which is a temporary hold. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit today in this January 3rd episode. Um, we'll figure out. Maybe I'll do the little figures, the little AI art, but we're gonna have video a little bit. I hope to have some guests on this year. I got away from doing guests last year. I've been a really busy year. I think you could tell from my spotty uh, release cycle in the fall. I just wasn't getting a lot of podcast work in, and maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe and I feel that I obviously recognize that the world will go on without my podcast, but I'm gonna still do it. I like doing it. Maybe I'll get more listeners, and if eventually someday it'll come to an end. All things come to an end. All things come, and that's my segue. All things come to an end. And my former game, And it's not a former game. I'm continuing playing Monday Night AD&D. I've decided to keep it on Monday. I speculated maybe I'd move it. But the world's not ending. I've been building this world, and I do have a story underlying this whole thing. But what's come to an end, and I like to now say a suspension, is a few of the players need a break from the game. They've been in it a long time, and the game is not really meeting their style anymore. And I heard them. Their complaints are valid. Everyone is free to criticize the rules of AD&D. They're even welcome to ask me or any dungeon master to consider modifications to the rules. What I realized though is they really wanted too many modifications of the rules. And I wasn't when I look at them all as a whole, I just wouldn't do them all. And some of the individual modifications they were asking for, I just don't agree with, and I don't understand why it's a problem. And for them, it's a problem because some of them feel like they don't really have a lot of time to play. I don't really know what some of the other problems are, the underlying problems are. It's except more like they just run things differently in their own games. And okay, then do it. Then like have your own game. That's the solution. The solution is run your own game. Now, the problem for players is they really need DMs. Players don't play without dungeon masters, and you have to know that as a player. Dungeon mastering is not easy, and most dungeon masters I know and play with or just know spend a lot of time on their games. A player really should just play the game. And I mean that sincerely. A player should never criticize the game. I mean, if you don't like it, you can tell the dungeon master, I don't really like your game, I'm not going to play. That is completely fair. But you don't play with a dungeon master over and over and over and constantly snipe at rules or bristle at rules, especially common rules that are being applied in the game. You also don't get upset when the dungeon master has expectations that players follow certain rules that are in their book. And I view AD&D as having a player's book and a dungeon master's book. I know there are other DMs out there who view both books kind of as the dungeon master's guide, and the dungeon master's book really supersedes what's in the player's handbook. I kind of take a different point of view. I find I enjoy the game better when I don't have to be into that player's handbook a lot. I only want to know spells that my NPCs are going to use. I don't want to play the characters' roles. I want players who are invested in the rules. I don't even want to say their characters anymore. I got to stop saying that. My players are always invested in their characters. But I want players who are going to be invested in the rules that their characters should take for granted, that should understand are part of the game. You only can carry so much. You have consumables. You have components and things you must do to cast your spells. Now, granted, not all the rules are in that player's book. In my game, I create a document where I have moved rules out of the DMG that are pertinent to playing the game as a player, such as the charge, cover, lots of different aspects of the game. I put in this document and I give it to the players and I say, look, I don't really want you crawling through the DMG. Some of my players know the DMG inside and out, and that's fine. Others don't. Honestly, there are players in my game who don't look in these books very much. So I put those rules in this document for that type of player who's not aware that they can charge or all that stuff. So I put it in there and say, hey, you know what? I really think the player's handbook should have had these rules in them. So here they are. I'm going to present them to you. I don't want you to waste your time going in the DMG, and I also don't want you. I don't want to argue about rules in the DMG. So I'm like, here are rules that you can take as Bible, as these are sacred rules in our game. You can charge. You get the +2. You'll lose your dex bonus. So I want these rules moved, imported. I want them to know these rules. And I'll just give an example of minor things that happen in the game that often annoyed me. So I was annoying the players with the rules, but they always would annoy me. And here's the example. We would have, it's different with Theater of the Mind, but often I'd set up adventures on owlbear. And I would show them on owlbear that they are 20 feet from the monster. And I'd ask for declared actions. And oftentimes, despite having the rules for close the distance, which is in the player handbook, it explains very clearly, not in the Dungeon Master's Guide, in the player's handbook, that if you're not within 10 feet of the monster, you must close the distance. But I gave them the rules on the charge. Here's the charge. You can also charge from any distance where you can cover the distance. In my game, I run 1E. I don't allow a move and an attack in the same round unless it's a charge. With some minor, I sometimes fudge it, especially if we're near the end of a battle and whatever. You know what I mean. There's times you fudge that a little bit, especially when we're doing Theater of the Mind. And it's like, and we do it a lot in my game. Even though we play electronically or online with the internet, I don't always throw up owlbear maps. Oftentimes we're just Theater of the Minding it, and I'll just say, yeah, this one's over here, this one's over there. What are you guys going to do? How are you going to handle it? And if I'll say, oh, well, you're more than 10 feet, so you'd have to charge, or not. But once the battle's whirling and swirling, if one player's technically 15 feet or 20 feet from the last monster, by the end of a melee, you know, every dungeon match, you speed it up a little. You just say, okay, you whirl around and you can attack. But really, when we're starting out, at the beginning of a melee, before the mess starts and everything's mixing up, you want to, there's certain steps we take. So one of the things that would frustrate me about a player is they would just say, they see the distance, they just say, I'm going to attack. I mean, I get it. It's 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, you're tired. I get it. I get it once in a while. But I would always then say, are you charging or closing the distance? Oh, I'm closing the distance. But they say it like they're upset. You see, then this is where I get frustrated. Like, maybe it's me, but that's the game. When I play, I tell Dungeon Master I'm charging, and one of my players DMs, and I'm in his game, and I think he listens to my podcast. He can totally agree. That's how I play the game. Dungeon Master, I'm going to close the distance. Actually, I play a fighter in his game. I never close the distance. I always charge first round. Always. It's a brilliant tactic. It's the best tactic for fighters, is to charge. But that's okay. You can't always charge, actually. He even allowed me to charge over rubble once because it was hard to see on the map presentation on owlbear. And then he realized that he wouldn't let the others charge. We were kind of like, well, my character must have just leapt over the rubble. And he was right. I technically shouldn't have been able to charge there. But I couldn't tell what was on the map or not. And he didn't notice it either. But the other players, he's got a great group of players. Other players were like, actually, I think there's a pile of rubble there. How could I even charge? See, that's a good player. You see, a good player self-limits themselves based on what they understand about the game and the rules. A good player would say, I couldn't possibly charge into that. There's a table there, there's a chair. My player, there's a sort of a competitive thing amongst my players in a way. I really think my players thought they were competing with me. I heard through the grapevine that one of them thought that I thought the game was a game of me versus them. And if that's true, if that's what they thought, which I don't agree at all with, and I wouldn't play in a game like that, and I certainly don't run my games like that. I actually think that's how they felt about the game. maybe I don't know. I don't think I come off that way. I view it as a game of me creating scenarios and adjudicating according to the rules as written. That's my role. It isn't me versus them. They're not competing against me. Honestly, I think players should compete against each other to be the best in the group, but it's not me versus them. So I felt there was kind of like a little competition going on, and in their desire to win, they wanted to bend rules. They wanted to charge through things. They were constantly making me remind them, you can't just attack. You must either charge or close the distance. You can't go through a wall. You can't whatever. You can't carry all that stuff. You have no idea what your component is. You don't have that component, or at least in game play, you never talked about getting that component. Now, that brings up a good point too. I wanted to mention there is a style of player who is so into their player, and I know this is true. I know people who do this. They actually tinker with their player outside the game. So not while they're in the dungeon in the middle of an adventure, but maybe when they're in the town and they start adding and doing things and buying equipment and stuff and adding it to their list. And then when they show up at the next session, it's like they don't even say anything. They don't even say anything. They just have all this new stuff. And they don't really issue the dungeon master like a new sheet and say, "Here, I added stuff to my game." And here's where I want to make a big distinction in my view of Dungeons and Dragons. Everyone who plays Dungeons and Dragons is a player, including the Dungeon Master. I've heard this repeated by other Dungeon Masters. We are playing the game as well. But exactly one player gets to do things between sessions and change things and add things and change the world. And it is only the Dungeon Master. Players only get to play their character in session or in a defined offline role session, or if the DM and the players agree that they're going to do and take care of some stuff offline, not even playing together, not even typing out, but then you must come back and share what you do. I hope people are nodding in agreement here. Dungeons and Dragons getting to the point where people are so invested in it, in a way, and in their character, they're almost living their character day to day at home and just by themselves. And call me crazy, but that would be like playing Monopoly. But like, you ever play a game of Monopoly with your friends and you don't have time to finish, or your family, and you don't have time to finish, you leave the board on the table and you're going to get to it the following Saturday? That would be like you came into the house and made a few rolls and went around the board a few times, and you didn't even tell anybody, and now you got a couple more properties and you got some more cash sitting in front of you. At the end of the day, Dungeons and Dragons is a game. And I'm going to pause here for a second. Okay, one of the things I like to do on my podcast is use the Merriam-Webster dictionary. I haven't done it in a while, but the Merriam-Webster dictionary, language is a cool thing. Really, it's still the most remarkable innovation of humans. Now, I think a lot of animals have language, most in some form or another, but the human language is the most advanced. So a game, it's a noun. A physical or mental competition conducted according to the rules with the participants in direct opposition to each other. A division of a larger contest. The manner of playing in a contest. A particular aspect or phase of play in a game or sport. The set of rules governing a game. My mic's in the way here. Let me see if I can move this panel over to here. The number of points necessary to win, points scored in certain card games, organized athletics, blah, blah, blah. An activity, here's one, an activity undertaken or regarded as a contest involving rivalry, strategy, or struggle. So, an activity engaged in for diversion or amusement. So there you go. There's a lot of definitions for it. D&D is a game, first and foremost. It's not a show. It's not a novel. It's not a story. It's not a video. It's not a podcast. It's not acting. It's not a performance. And players must remember that. And in order for a game to happen is that participants must play together. Now, D&D is not the first definition direct opposition to each other. It's not the kind of game where the dungeon master and the players are in direct opposition of each other, like Monopoly or chess or Risk or whatever other board games are out there. I like Ticket to Ride. You're directly competing with the others. D&D is not a competitive game. Obviously, it's a friendly. There is the acting and the role playing and the storytelling aspect to it. So it's not a pure game, but at its heart, it is a game, and it has a set of rules that govern it. And the fact is, the players or the competitors should all be together for the game to proceed. So when I said the DM's the only one that really should be playing the game between sessions and out of sight of the others, that's a truism. The DM shouldn't be creating the adventure with the players present and telling them what he's doing. I stocked this room with that and I put this there. That would ruin the game, right? We can all agree that's not how you play the game. The DM must prepare an adventure unknown to the players. The DM cannot have encounters between sessions, and when you meet up the following session, say, I killed your character died. Well, while you were working all week and spending time with your family or doing the other things you love to do, I put your players in a room, rolled some dice, and you all died. That's not the game either. So the players can't, between sessions, just add things to the character sheet, deduct treasure. Now, when I say all this, no one in my game actually did that. That hasn't happened. But I'm just saying I know that happens. So there are some players that are so mindful of these rules, and that's awesome. You want them to be like that. If a player wants to look through the books between sessions, I want them to do that. That's great. But they want to get a special component, and it's between session. They're in the town. It's between adventures, I mean. And they're in town. Nothing's going on. They go get that. They go get it. They go get it. They deduct the cost. That's all fine. But the player must or should be conscientious and tell everybody and the DM they did it as soon as the next session begins, and supply a new sheet if your DM's keeping sheets. Not all DMs keep sheets. Now, a lot of what I'm saying obviously doesn't apply to convention gaming, or one-shot playing. I think I'm talking about a campaign where you're building a arc of your player. You start off with nothing down here, and you become something great. You start off as this little guy who can only afford a spear and a little seashell on his head, and eventually you become a mighty formidable player, a dragon maybe. I gotta paint these things. Why don't I paint my miniatures? Because I don't like painting. That's why. All right. So players and DMs, be mindful that it's a community game. One other thing I don't like. Players who are mysterious and don't want the other players to know anything about them. It's fun sometimes. Sometimes it's fun. Really. It can be fun. But it really can get tiring. Or players that are playing a character where they feel like they're somehow in opposition to the rest of the players. Or not really part of the group or friendly with the group. It's, gets old. So now where am I going with all of this? Endings. I feel some of those players who won't be playing with me in the coming year will recharge their batteries, miss the game. No, not playing with me, but they're going to miss AD&D and come back and maybe to me or someone else and say, I want to play just AD&D. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is a great product. And as I said to the players, let me pause here. So as I said to my players and added to my player document, AD&D, as written, provides a powerful, robust gaming system whereby the most motivated players can pretty much do whatever they want. They can find more magic items by seeking quests. They can create spells. They can seek sages, build fortresses as they reach prominence. The world is really boundless, but there are micro aspects players must be aware of and responsible for. That's how I view AD&D. A player can in the gaming session propose anything they want to do, swing from a chandelier, dive under tables, whatever their imagination wants them to do, they can do. But they're micro things that will prohibit them from doing certain things. The fighter cannot scale a sheer wall. Now, I would think before I really knew anything about the rules of AD&D, why couldn't any player try that? Well, it says under the thief's description you can't. Absolutely forbidden. And that's in the Dungeon Master's Guide, not in the player's handbook. That could be a source of tension. Most players realize that, though. And it probably has more to do with the armor, things like that. Dungeon Masters can make exceptions to that rule anytime they want. If your fighter says, I am going to strip down, I'm going to just go up armor class 10 with none of my equipment and just a dagger, the Dungeon Master can make a... The Dungeon Master, although the DMG admonishes Dungeon Masters from allowing that, saying it will ruin the balance of the game and undermine the thief character, the Dungeon Master can allow it. He could just look at the first level thief percentage chance of succeeding climbing walls and lower it. Maybe give the fighter a dex bonus if he has a bonus, and then the fighter has to roll. A lot of things can happen despite the rules. But when players say they want to carry a lot more equipment than they could possibly carry, that, the Dungeon Master has to, at some point, not allow it. And you'd hope your players wouldn't attempt to do that. You hope your players would say, I know I can't carry this amount of equipment. So what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to get all this treasure and stuff back to our home base? Because I read in the player's handbook the whole part about encumbrance and the challenge of moving large quantities of items. I knew that's in the rule, and I anticipated it would probably come up. So a player shouldn't really put their Dungeon Master in the position of constantly reminding them, hey, well, you can't carry all that. Or what are you doing? Are you closing the distance or charging? Or just tell me, I'm always charging when I'm, Players can be responsible in how they play. And if not, then don't feel your Dungeon Master is being adversarial. I think an adversarial Dungeon Master would be one who constantly says, you can't do that. And also, while limiting you all the time, like you can't swing from the chandelier. There's really no rule for that. Or constantly says, I don't know. I don't really know what an adversarial DM is. To me, an adversarial DM puts up unreasonable elements in the game. I'm not, when I design, I think Tomb of Horrors is an example of an adversarial Dungeon Master. Overuse of traps that require saves versus death. To me, that's adversarial. Now, Tomb of Horrors is amazing and fun adventure. But I don't run. I would never run it as part of a campaign without significant modification because I'm not an adversarial DM. And this brings me to the next thing I wanted to talk about. I just rewatched the Grog Empire's Emperor James, and a lot of my listeners come from the Grog Empire. That's why I bring it up. His podcast, Grog Talk, last January talked about, does the DM kill the players? Now this gets to this whole idea of adversarial, and he made great points in his discussion, and some things I don't really agree with, but I think it was excellent and well presented, and I liked his discussion of it. And I would say what he didn't mention is, and I'm gonna get into what he meant. Let's start with what he said, and I hope I'm summarizing it correctly. But he basically said the dungeon master really adjudicates everything that happens in the game. He can make decisions. So he gave an example of like a player said, "I just want to slit my throat," and the dungeon master could just say, "Well, no, you don't. You don't slit your throat." I guess he's right. Dungeon master could do that. He brought up an example of a player wants to just kill a town's cleric so the townsfolk will attack him and kill him. And the dungeon master could say, "No, there's a shield. A shield appears. There's divine intervention, and you can't kill the cleric." So what he's saying is basically the dungeon master can mitigate bad behavior of the players. The other side of the coin, he said, is the dungeon master is really in perfect control of whether players live or die. But he said the other part of the argument, he said this is a trope that goes all the way back to the old days of D&D. The other part of the trope is the players kill themselves. That the dungeon master is just completely neutral spirit, and the players' actions always result in either their living or their death. And he said that's not true. And he brought this point up. By fiat, the DM can not kill players or ensure they don't die. Because the rules say that, it's supposed to be a fun game, and you really can ignore rules, and that's absolutely true. I agree. I 100% agree with James's reasoning. But it has to, he did say there has to be a balance. Eventually, he got to the point where there has to be balance. And I don't want to quibble with his specific examples because he's making a point, and people, and myself included, just make up examples to make your point. And he made fine examples. But where I will quibble a little bit with this idea, the player really does drive the game. The player does drive the game. Certainly the dungeon master sets up challenges, or should be setting up challenges that are commensurate with the skill level of the players, and usually rising to the crescendo of the big bad. Right? That's the game. That's how we play the game. And then the random encounters could be really deadly, or like super friendly, or super simple. But DMs who use too many traps or too many tricks, or think they're just clever, that's probably a little adversarial. The DM doesn't have to do that, to James's point. You don't have to always have save versus die monsters. You don't always have to have save versus poison darts traps. I try to eliminate them. When I plan adventures, I don't really put a lot of traps in the game. Because as a player, I don't enjoy it. And as a dungeon master, one of James's points was, one of the Emperor's points was, the continuity of the game is important. And what he means by that is constantly rolling new characters is troubling. And I agree with that. So when I look at a TSR module, like N1, which I just ran, or other modules, I shy away from ones that have a lot of save versus die stuff in it. Now this one had a couple, not a lot though. And I often will say weak poisons take longer to kill player. I don't like ruining the continuity of the game because of a trap on a chest after you just had an amazing battle with a bunch of serious monsters, and now you're getting your just reward, and you get pricked by a needle and die. I know other DMs one in the Grog Empire who loves that stuff. Even after you defeat the big bad, something happens to you. Like there's always some poison gas or something. Something magical that happens before you can actually grab the Holy Grail or the treasure. He loves it. And you know what? He runs one shots, and his games are fun, and it's a one shot, so you don't care about your character. You know half of you are going to be dead because that's how he runs the game. But and I don't know how he runs his campaign because I've never been in his actual campaign. I seriously doubt he runs his campaign like that. Again, the continuity becomes a problem. You just can't be killing the characters all the time. You can hold rolls, you can fudge rolls. James is right. Dungeon Masters could do a lot of things to keep characters alive. And I have a pretty impressive record of players lasting a long time. Although my players were arguing that that's not true, that I'm somehow very adversarial. We started the first New Beginnings in May of 2023, and those characters made it to the September of 2024, and then there was a TPK. And this was for a variety of reasons. It wasn't an adversarial thing. It's the game wasn't working. The module, which I'd found online somewhere, which was the Haunted Keep from the basic book. Someone made the dungeons and filled it all. I thought it looked cool. I planted it somewhere in my gaming world, as I do with TSR modules. Created my own names for it all. Tried to create a little bit of a background to why the things were there, and we ran it. And the players were being real experimental with their player types. They really weren't wearing a lot of armor. It just was, the whole game was kind of foobar. So I pushed it. I did ultimately push it to a conclusion where we were just going to have the battle with between the players and the big bad. After a year and 4 months, either they were able to kill the big bads or they weren't. And they obviously could have just abandoned the game, the adventure. They could have abandoned the adventure anytime. I gave them hooks. I was giving them lots of little hooks to do other things. But man, they really wanted to finish this adventure somehow. But I'm a player too, and I was getting sick of the game, not them. I was just getting sick of the game, and I didn't really like a lot of their characters. Their characters were not good D&D characters. And is that for me to decide? Partly. When the characters are weakly armored, it really makes it difficult to be a DM, because you know they're just going to get killed all the time. So being aware of continuity, I tried to help them along, gave them backup characters, all this stuff. We had the final battle, and I was right. They couldn't do it. They were too weak. So, and I ran the final battle. I ran it as myself before we did it. And there were ways. They could have won it. There were ways to win it, but the players just, they didn't always use what was available to them. But it wasn't their fault. We had the TPK, and it was good because we rebooted then in 2024, started playing around October, and we've been playing N1 now for over a year. And now the prior rendition, the Borgarns group, they lost maybe 4 or 5 characters. I mean, a couple of the main characters died, a couple of the backup characters died, and then we had the total TPK. I would attribute that both to the DM running an adventure that probably was a little not very good now. My opinion of that Haunted Tower adventure is poor. I wouldn't run it ever again. It just wasn't. It was just a little too difficult, probably for the level group it was advertised for. So there was a lot of character death there. Continuity was disrupted often. A lot of time was spent with them just recovering and recuperating. The game wasn't good. I even knew it wasn't good. Now, apparently, I heard now that they really loved those characters. I didn't know that. I just thought the game wasn't that good, and I was ready to move on to something else. That's not why I had the TPK. I was ready to move on to another adventure, even with those characters. So I wanted to just put an end to the Borgarns part, the tower part, and move on. Once and for all. Like the movie. The big battle, once and for all. So the new game starts, and this party, as I have said since 2024, was a great D&D party. They had 2 fighters, 2 clerics, and a magic user, and a thief. Then when our thief really, he couldn't play anymore, we added a third. They got a third cleric. I mean, that's a powerful group in D&D. They even had a druid for a while until he had a conflict and had to stop playing. Now that druid in offline roleplay ended up getting killed by like a half hit dice monster. Druids are not great characters. They're not strong characters in D&D. They really aren't. And I think a party in the Borgarns party, they didn't even have a cleric, but they had a druid. So your party is really handicapped without a cleric. And that's what led to a lot of wasted time. As soon as a couple guys would get hit point damage, they wanted to go back to town to rest because they didn't have the cleric. They didn't have the field medicine out there with them. So it was a weak party. The new party had the 2 clerics, and they had a cleric magic user even. So they had essentially had 2 magic users, 2 clerics, 2 fighters. And we added a thief for a while. He left. We had a druid for a while. He didn't. Druid's, druid. The game's not. Druid's a funny character. The druid's a funny character in Dungeons and Dragons for a game that takes place mostly underground. I just don't even understand why Gary added it to the book. So it makes no sense to me unless you're playing a lot of wilderness. And same with the ranger. The ranger character doesn't really make sense to me in underground adventures. The paladin's a cool character. The fighter, the cleric, the thief. In my limited conception of the game, the main character classes are the game. Like, that's the game. You're going to have a really great game with those character classes. And the sky's the limit with what they do. A fighter could become a knight. Why not? The DM can allow it. Whatever. So, strong party. One PC died in 15 months of playing, or 14 months of playing. One. That's a strong group. And I threw a lot at them, but they had a lot of healing. They were able to save guys before they hit negative 10 hit points. Every player at one point or another was severely injured during melee. They were taking on all challenges and mowing through them. This was a really fantastic group of players or characters. And the game was really going on. Now, I have to admit, the N1 aspect of it was dragging out. 15 months of running pretty much the same cavern is getting a little, for my creative point of view, it was getting a little old. And one of the other players wanted to just leave, and he didn't even want to go back. They left a whole bunch of treasure there after killing the Naga. They said they wanted to go back and search the rest of the lair. I didn't say no. I guess to James the Emperor's point, I should have just said no. It collapsed or whatever. What? Like, I could find ways to say no. But I said, all right, that's what they want to do. That's what they want to do. They want to say there was some more treasure there. And I said, you know what, I'll just restock it. It had been over a month. I put some easy monsters in. Lizard men are not difficult monsters. I put some lizards. There were troglodytes still that they didn't kill. There was there's some more stuff. And I added a big bad in the Naga's lair. I added a big bad. So if they decide to go back to the Naga's lair, they could have another. It would have been a great fight. And I added the Gibbering Mouther. It was great fight. It was awesome. The Gibbering Mouther. And of course, there's the random encounters. All right, we'll make a go of it. Let them go back. It's easy for me. It was like I don't know. I don't know when they defeated the Naga. September, October timeframe. End of the year's hard for me. It's easy. I'll just restock this adventure. We'll run it. See how it goes. It was going great. We're having fun, but the constant ignorant. I think it was deliberate. The constant not playing the game with the DM, vis-a-vis the DM, with the declarations. That's the players. You see, James talked about the ability of the DM to adjudicate things and run the game the way he wants to run the game. But the players also have a lot of leeway and power on how they approach the game. And the constant just, I'm just attacking. I'm just attacking. From not when you're, look, here's the map. From one end of my little, let's see if I can get this. From one end of my little screen here to the other is 35 feet. When the player here constantly just says, I'm attacking. Well, okay, you're going to use your bow? No, I'm attacking. Are you charging or closing the distance? Now, you might say it should be obvious to me they're charging. And I would agree. I would assume they were actually charging. But here's a funny caveat to my game. We adopted the specialization rules out of the Unearthed Arcana per player request when we started this second group of players, this powerful group of players. Ironic that the second, per specialization, you get 2 attacks. It's a 3/2 number of attacks for the fighter. 3/2. Per rule, a lot of DMs don't do it this way because they mess it up. Per rule, that second attack comes in round 1. It comes in the even round, not the odd round. It doesn't come in the even round. So that's how we're doing it. So let's go back to this scenario. 35 feet. Oops, I switched it. 35 feet. Ooh. You got to understand, everything's reversed to me on the screen. You're 35 feet away, and they say they want to attack. I should just assume, right? I would assume it's a charge. Woo, I'm going to attack, right? No. My players started not wanting to charge because they didn't want to lose their second attack in round 1. Because per a charge, you get 1 attack at the end of the charge. It doesn't matter what level player you are or how many attacks you have. You get 1 attack routine at the end of the charge. They didn't want to lose it. They didn't want to lose it. So, that's why I had to start clarifying. You see the conundrum, the box they put me in? I normally would just assume, I would just tell a player, okay, you want to attack from 35 feet, you charge. You get 1 attack at the end, you lose your dex. And I present these rules in my document to them. But no, I didn't want to charge. I just want to attack. Okay, well, at 35 feet, then you're going to close the distance. Right. Yes, I'm going to close the distance. Next battle, same thing. What are you going to do? I'm going to attack. Are you? Okay, you're going to charge. No, I want to just attack and get my 2. Well, then you're going to close the distance. Guess what? In my players' twisted way of thinking, they were losing their second attack in round 1 anyway. They spent the odd round just closing the distance. The next round was an even round. So now they only get it. So I told them that if we're going to use the specialization rule, each player's not having separate odd even rounds. We're not doing that. There's enough to worry about during a combat. And now to worry whether you're on your first attack or your second attack. No, it clearly states it's 3 attacks in 2 rounds, and the first attack happens in the odd round. So the game has an even round, an odd round, and an even round. There was no reason not to ever charge from distance, because you were going to lose that second attack no matter what. So anyway, I always charge. I don't care about the second attack. I want that +2 to hit. That's a 10% bonus to hit, on top of all your other bonuses. I mean, hitting is much more important than actual attacks. So anyway, I'm kind of diverging there. The point is, they put me in a box, and we're constantly. I mean, this was going on every melee. I can even show offline role play. You saw the picture. You are 15 feet from the gibbering mouther. Are you charging or are you closing the distance? I didn't want to assume. Maybe there's other players who would have been fine if I just said you charge and you attack. But my players, my 2 fighters would have said, I didn't want to charge. Then say you're closing the distance. That's your action. Or take out your bow, and you get 2 attacks with your bow always. Like, work with me, players. Work with me. Mind the micro things. Yeah, I'm sorry if that drags the game down to a level of detail you don't like, but there are players out there who love the details and the micro things during combat. I am one of them. So anyway, the continuity of the game, Dungeon Master Fiat, adjudicating, it's everyone. James is right, but he's wrong. It's really everyone's job to be mindful of how the game runs. And if players are trying to just kill themselves deliberately, as a DM, I realize that means they don't respect the game anymore. Let them do it. To James's example, let them do it. Kill them and say, I don't want you to play anymore. You get, or take a break. You need a break. Or players who are chafing about just standard gameplay. I mean, I guess this is how games like Monopoly get rules bent and changed. I mean, the whole free parking money. That I guess it's human nature to look at rules and play a game and just say I don't like it and I want to change the rules. Fortunately, the game of chess is not one of those games. I've never played anyone. I've never played anyone in chess who has a homebrew rule for chess or poker. I mean, there are games that survive by the way they're intended to be played, and you know what? There are a lot of people out there playing AD&D as close to the rules as they could possibly play them. So I don't know. I looked at 5e. There's kind of like a snobby idea among us grognards, and I share it myself, that AD&D is really just rules light game. And after our discussion with my players about the encumbrance and how that really bothered them, I was going to say, why don't you just play 5e? But I actually looked up 5e, and it's like it's in the rules still. Encumbrance is a fundamental to the game. It's just a fundamental. Yeah, the spell components. I guess if we start a game and players are like, we don't really want to use these spell components, they're just stupid. I'm not gonna not have a game because of that. But in my last game and all my prior games, we were mindful of them to a degree, and so I just continued it. I mean, if we're going to be mindful of them, we're going to continue it. But I don't really think I want to get rid of the components entirely. I just think you make a rule that the small ones, the little tiny ones that seem kind of easy to have are just we're not going to track or worry about. But I like my idea that the more difficult ones have to be acquired. This is a game balance. I'm looking at the rules. This is a balancing thing, right? We could play basic. There are no components in basic. We could muddle. Take them out of my game. I'll think about it. I think about it as we get ready to launch the next one. We could say there aren't really material components for most of the spells, which is kind of like hand-waving sulfur powders and pinches of dust. But there will be components for other spells. And I could say, and that will be up to me, and I'll let you know when you get the spells. And then at that point, I'm basically saying, I don't want any discussion about it. I'm going to give you a great boon. For most of your spells, you could use your holy symbol as a cleric, or just don't worry about what the component is as a player. But when I say, oh, this component is important, now that you have this spell, don't complain. I might go to that. I might be willing to go that far. Of course, I got to have players too. So I'll work with the players on that moving forward. But a lot of the micro issues, I don't give out adventuring packs. Maybe that's annoying. I know there was something that came up over the use of oil in my game. They spent about 3 days in the lair fighting those lizard men. During that 3-day period, they had to take some long rests because of a player dropped below 0, but not below -3, so he needed a full day of rest. another NPC player, their NPC guard for the magic user, he needed a full 7 days rest, but they took the 1 day rest. I told them, as we're playing, I'm not bugging them. Hey, deduct an oil, and 4 hours, deduct an oil. I don't do that. I knew on their sheets they had oil. I didn't know exactly how much, but I knew they had oil. So okay, they got oil. They got a lantern. They have a human. See, they had two humans. Two human. The new cleric was a human, and the NPC was a human. So they needed a light source. Otherwise, this party doesn't even need a light. They were all the people in this party were demi-humans, so they didn't need a light source. But because of the humans, they did. But I wasn't a hard ass. I'm never a hard ass about that. I don't want to bog down my game either, asking about oil. So over the course of 3 days, it turned out they only had 4 or 5 flasks of oil between all the players and the lantern. So I said, okay, we're going to throw out the long rest period, but even doing that, because I said during the long rest period there was enough rubble in the lair. They could collect wood and just burn fires in the room they were in, and you can go without light when people are resting, right? You just don't even need light. So, but I said it's perfectly obvious that over 3 days, it's like 72 hours, subtracting out the 2 rest periods. You still were down there adventuring and needing light and moving all that treasure they found. They had to move all the treasure to a room. I said, yeah, four flasks of oil. I mean, 4 or 5. You definitely were out of it. Why did this come up? They had the encounter with the trolls. And when the battle was over, and this wasn't even a big deal, they're just like, oh, we're just going to pour our oil on it. It burned them. And because one escaped. I said, I don't, who has any oil left? And they were kind of like, well, I got it on my sheet. I got 2. And they're all like citing their sheet. I got 2. I got 1. I got 1. I got 1. I'm like, hey guys, look, I'm like, sorry guys, and we were doing this offline. I'm typing this. Hey guys, sorry, but you burned up all your oil in the lair. I said, but I'm like, this isn't a big deal, but you're just gonna have to like, I'm just saying like creatively, you're gonna have to like collect wood and burn it under wood. So I'm saying on the one hand, well, you don't have the oil anymore. But on the other hand, you're going to still burn the troll. It's not a problem. I'm just trying to... It's just kind of like, be realistic, guy. I don't know. Maybe I should just said, fine, you burned the troll. Like, did it matter? They were going to burn the troll. It partly mattered, though, because I believe someone... See, here's the problem. Someone got hurt in that battle against the troll below 0 again. And they were going to have to camp. So in my mind, I'm starting to prepare for this extended day in the wilderness. So I'm kind of thinking, like, how are you going to burn the troll? Like, you're going to have to build a lot of wood. And then I'm like, you're going to have to move. Like, why am I worrying about all this? As a dungeon master, you know that time and space and inactivity result in random rolls. That's all. I was trying to figure out, I'm gonna have to do another random roll. A couple. One for this new situation of taking all this time to burn the troll, moving away to have a new camp, and then an overnight. So that's really, if the players are like, why are you hassling us about this? Understand your DM has a reason. And when he doesn't hassle you about it at another time, it's because there is no reason to hassle you. So this is my point. It goes both ways to James the Emperor. This is the players and the DM are not opposing each other. It's not like this. It's not like these are the players and this is the DM. It's like this. The players and the DM together. Making this game together. Using the rules. If your DM's asking you why you're doing something or how you're doing something or how long something's going to take, he's got responsibilities to the world that he's playing as well as responsibilities to you. And the fact we were doing this on offline with our little keyboards, we weren't wasting time on a call debating how you're going to burn the trolls, although we would have talked about it on the session in front of the camera. It would have been a faster discussion. But it wasn't taking like we had infinite amount. We weren't playing in December. We weren't even going to get together and play real. So we just whatever. It could take date. We could use date when you're playing by post or by keyboard. You don't have to have live discussions. The DM just poses a question and you can respond a day or two later. It doesn't matter. Like, what's the difference? I don't even understand what the difference is. So players and DMs. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. No one's going to be perfect. But don't question your DM players. Really don't question your player. And DMs don't just put up a bunch of traps and save versus dies and stifle your players' creativity. Don't stifle creativity. Okay? But enforce the rules. Telling players they can't carry a whole bunch of crap in one time is not stifling creativity, but not letting them swing on a chandelier or having the chandelier chain break and then they kill themselves. I mean, or always telling that fighter, there's no way you're ever going to be maybe there is a time he can climb up that wall. I mean, let the players have some flexibility and creativity. But players, man, just respect your dungeon master. You should just appreciate the guy playing the game as the dungeon master. Just appreciate it. So that's my not my muddle, my rumination. MW's very long video rumination here in the set. The bike. I got a bike back here. I like to ride a bike. I don't know if any of my players like to ride a bike. I'm working on this cable hanging down here. I just switched this light plug. Let's see if I can try it. This light was plugged in on the other side in that outlet over there. And my computer and everything are plugged in on this wall, which goes to the light switch. And, a lot of times someone would come in my house, like my son or something, and turn the light switch off and shut down my computer while it was on. Now, I didn't lose any work because everything is on auto saves and stuff. That's not the problem, but it's not good for the computer. So I finally decided I need to have this light onto the switch and leave it on all the time. And I want my computer plugged in that outlet over there, which is not associated with the switch. And I have one other outlet on a wall over here, but that's on the other side of the door, so I couldn't use that one. So I ordered some extension cables. I unscrewed the top of the IKEA shelf, took all the books off, moved it out a little, ran an extension cord behind at the bottom, which I now have my computer and everything plugged into. Unattached the wire from back inside the shelf there between the walls so you couldn't see it. Flipped it over, ran it down here, and plugged it into another extension cord, so it's now on the switch. So I can now turn that light on with my switch, but not affect my computer. So I don't know why I'm telling you all that, but it's just why the wire's sticking out right now. I haven't, my extension cord's not long enough, so I got to get another one. And that's not one I bought, it's one I had, and then I'll move that back and it'll look a little neater. The set's coming along, though. The set's coming along. Get this poster hung up. And maybe you'll see more of MW in video as this year goes on. Maybe even some of the sessions. I'd like to ask the new players about that. So Happy New Year, everyone, and that's the show. Don't forget to explore the many worlds in your own mind.